We are in the early morning hours of August 8th, 2024, and I'm in Greenville, South Carolina to see a living legend, Glenis Redmond. Glenis is one of the most powerful and intelligent and memorable poets you'll ever read, and I feel so lucky to be here with her today. But before I make my way to Glenis's place, I'm going to start the morning in this journey in Waterloo, South Carolina, at the site of what used to be the Rosemont Plantation. And from there, I'm going to trace the path of Glenis's family history in South Carolina all the way to Greenville, and where we'll be talking today at her home. And the reason I'm doing this is because this history is in all things that Glenis writes, and it motivates, animates all of her life. You can't separate the past in South Carolina from Glenis Redmond and her work. And so I think it's important to honor that and trace this history best I can to understand where Glenis is coming from, where her family comes from. And I want to take this opportunity to thank our mutual friend, Julian Davis, a wonderful artist in his own right in Asheville, North Carolina, who put me on to Glenis a few years ago when I moved here. Without him, this meeting doesn't happen. I never learn about Glenis and her history and her family's history and her writing, and I don't have my soul lit on fire. And so I owe him a great many thanks. And you should check out his episode on the Story Made podcast, because it's going to help you understand why he and Glenis are such good friends, and why I also think Glenis and I are going to be such good friends. It's a really great conversation with Julian, and I think you'll enjoy it. But anyway, back to Glenis in South Carolina. If you are someone who wants to be an artist or wants to change the course of their life, then I really hope you listen to this episode. And I really hope you listen to Glenis and learn about her story. Because if you do, I guarantee you will overcome that fear. Whatever it is that's blocking you from living the life you want to live, making the art you want to make, you're going to feel like you can break those barriers down. In Glenis's story is the path to finding oneself. And it's not glamorous, it's not easy. It's the opposite of those things. It's really difficult, and that's why so many people don't do it. But let Glenis be a guide for your artist journey, for your life's journey, and you'll start finding your way. And in learning about Glenis's story, you'll also learn about the stories of so many unheralded people whose lives are really important and we just don't know about. And it's Glenis's attention to these stories that makes her really special and makes her work really special. And I believe those stories, in addition to Glenis's, will also help you find the courage and the strength within yourself to go live the life you want to live. And so if there's anything you take away from this, it's probably going to be that, is that Glenis Redmond is a force of nature. She is an artist who would not be denied, and I am in awe. And I have so much admiration for her. And that's why I feel so lucky to be here with her today and to share stories and to feel that power of Glenis in real life. It's something to behold. But that's a few hours from now, and I got to get in the car and head down to the Rosemont Plantation and see where all of this began. You're listening to Books on the Bed, where I travel through the country asking our hosts, if I came to your town and stayed at your house, what books would you put on my bed? Each host will share 6 books for me to carry with me on the journey of my life. And I'm here to share those books with you. As we go, we're building a digital library with every book put on every bed across the country. And who knows, maybe someday, the world. We are trying to share as many diverse stories as possible to part a curtain between us and bring us closer to each other. We hope these books and conversations make a meaningful difference in your life. Thank you for listening and being with us on this journey. So, I always start with gifts for you.
Oh.
And I want to give some context here.
Okay.
The first gift I'm going to give you comes from something I read. I don't know how many years ago you said this, but you tell the story of becoming a poet. And you said, I was a poet, probably from the womb, but I had forgotten about the poetry because I was so busy trying to be a good daughter, a good wife, a good everything else. I forgot about myself. But I put poetry on the back burner. It wasn't until I was 28 when I had my midlife crisis, a little early. I was married, my daughters were 2 years old, and they're twins, and you were counseling. So you said you were working 9 to 5 and dragging ass home. Come to find out, I was really ill. I went to my boss, and she was actually the one who suggested I take some time off. And I burst into tears in public, which I wasn't used to doing at the time. And then you never went back because you went on medical leave. And then you went to this conference called Healthy Connections. You said, I already signed up, so I decided to go anyway, and that is when a door opened. The door had opened with the illness, but the door really widened when I was at Malaprops. They happened to be in town in Greenville with their books. I had already picked up about 6 books and told my friend, don't let me buy another book. But this red book kept calling me. Later, my friend said to me, you know that book you picked up? There's a woman downtown teaching a workshop on that book. The book was The Artist's Way. Immediately, you picked up the phone, called the teacher, and every Saturday for the next 12 weeks, you met with a group of 21 people. I thought I was going back to be a visual artist because I had all these images in my head. But we started writing in The Artist's Way, and we'd read. We'd check in every Saturday, and when I'd read, people would say, you're a writer. And I was like, really? So I started doing my morning pages, and the poetry just started flowing. And that's really the very, very beginning. And so then you go on and you talk about how in 1993, everything fell through the roof, fell out. For a year there, I had no identification. It was a year-long struggle. It was the best struggle because I started to claim myself. Is it okay to be just me? Around 94, I was with the same group I did The Artist's Way with, and we would go out and do functions together. We were at, I think, an Alvin Ailey performance. During intermission, I said to a group of friends, I think I'm going to do a reading. And then I went to the bathroom, and when I got back, everything was planned. The date, everything. There was no backing out. And then you did your first reading at the Village Cafe, surrounded by friends and family. It was a loving, supportive experience. You decided to do 5 readings a month for a year. I don't care where, Girl Scouts, clubs, wherever. I immersed myself in the world of poetry. I was really purposeful about it. I came up here to do a poetry slam at the Green Door on Carolina Lane. I was this little suburbanite who didn't travel at night. I gathered all my courage, left my husband, kissed the kids, went out in the night, and drove to Asheville. It was the scariest place to me. Bob Falls was in the audience, and he asked me, did I want to go on the road and do poetry with Poetry Alive? And I did for 8 weeks. It was lovely working with Poetry Alive. You get to learn from other people's poems, but I was in the business of figuring out my authentic voice at the time. So I was ready to do my own thing. When I got off the road, I said, well, I want to do this for myself with my voice. So I read that, and I think it sums up a lot about what we're going to talk about, I think, today. But I got you this book that I think you will connect with because of your own story.
Oh, really? Oh, my goodness.
That's the first of 2.
Okay.
So go ahead and open it.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'm already in tears. Is that what you were planning for me to just break down?
Mm-hmm. No.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. And this wrapping is beautiful.
I've been practicing as a bookseller. Gotta get it good.
Oh. Call It Horses.
By Jesse Van Eerden.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I picked this is it is a road trip book with 3 unlikely people in the same car trying to outrun grief and claim their own selves in this world. So it starts in West Virginia. Jesse Van Eerden's from Preston County, West Virginia. And they're taking a trip out west because her aunt, who was her guardian when her parents died,
Yeah.
the protagonist, wants to go to New Mexico to experience that fresh air and different feel, like from the bogginess of Appalachia,
Right.
before she dies. And then this other random girl tags along who has a complicated relationship with her husband and is trying to escape the same thing. Truly, they're all in their own way trying to claim their own voices, their own lives. And they're doing it in this way where she's writing the story of that. But language is so centered in this book, and I know you're going to love what the power of naming things and knowing names and the history. So anyway, that's why I got you this book.
Well, thank you so much. I've not heard of it. I should have.
You're going to love it.
The title is amazing. Call It Horses.
And wait till you get to the point where that comes into play. Like I don't know how many times I teared up in this book, but oh my gosh, Jessie is one of the most undervalued voices in Appalachian writing.
Oh, okay.
She's a professor at Hollins.
Oh, okay.
In Roanoke.
Awesome. Yes.
I'm actually going to see her later this month, probably.
Oh, wonderful.
For an interview. So
okay.
I think you'd be friends.
Oh, well, thank you. I can't wait. It means a lot. And it's so interesting that you said she's at Hollins. That's where Alan Wolf, that's where they moved to. They left Asheville, and they just landed there, I think, last week.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be many more connections, but...
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can't wait to...
I just feel like... And the road, too. It's on the road.
The
like
road.
We just
it's on the road.
this.
And grief.
Mm-hmm. And it... as a man who hasn't experienced what these three women are experiencing, I think it was yet again another important story of, like, it sounds crazy to do what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. But
when you start to understand the history and the past of, like, why this is happening, it illuminates.
Well, you got me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's a book about courage, I think, too, at the heart. Because it's hard to find your own voice, to claim yourself when you're totally lost. So, yeah, I read that several months ago, and I was like, I got to bring it up because it's the beginning.
It is truly the beginning, and then the part where, I was so much a box checker and doing the thing that I thought I was supposed to do for everyone else. And I had never really, I think maybe in the 8th grade, and maybe that's why I pivoted back to poetry, was in the 8th grade when my teacher said, we're going to write in our journal. I didn't really necessarily want to write in the journal, but then I realized when I was writing, I started asking questions that no one had ever asked me before. And then so from age 13 to that age 28, there was that direct connection. The Artist Way was doing the same thing. Here we go again with these questions, and what's inherent in questions? Quest. This trip that I needed to go on, but only I could take myself on it and I had to be willing to dive deep and not be afraid of what I was going to find. Because I was in therapy at the time, and I remember my therapist was saying, because she said, you should probably meditate. You have some anxiety, whatever. I said, I am deathly afraid of meditation. And she said, well, what are you afraid of? I said, well, I feel like I'm going to be annihilated because I live with a lot of terror. The trauma that I grew up with, it felt like terror. I felt like I was going to be literally stalked and she said, well, just try it. Close your eyes and do it for 1 minute. And she said, when you get to that point where you're going to feel like you're going to be annihilated, what I want you to do, and I thought she was going to say, just open your eyes and don't worry about it. She didn't say that. She said, keep your eyes closed and go into it. And I was like, what? And 1 minute turned to 2 minutes, turned to 30 minutes, turned to an hour. And that was me, for the first time, confronting what was inside. And those questions were part of that, going deeper, not being afraid of yourself. Yeah. Don't be afraid. With whatever you find, it's there, and you're gonna have to.
It's not going away.
It's not. Or you can have these quirks or these anxiety-ridden moments. Because I had a lot of quirks in my life where there were things I wouldn't do. I didn't like talking on the telephone. If somebody called, there were weird things fear that I had done. And once I started breathing through those fears, then a lot of that stuff disappeared.
Yeah. And I just love that you even said from the beginning, I've always been a poet. right? But there were those things blocking. But once you got there, it started flowing.
Yes.
And who you really are.
Yes.
The poet, the artist just came out.
It was waiting. It was waiting at the door. It was sitting there waiting for the door, though. It's like, what took you so long? What took you so long? But there were a lot of conventional, traditional things that were happening in my life that, and I'm not knocking those things, but they kept me from who I was.
Yeah. And I think that's where I really, part of the reason I want to share your story among all these people that I talk to is the common thread is, are you willing to face yourself and make the choice that is really difficult, but is right for you and is going to help you be better in all facets of your life? I mean, I don't think not being a poet and just focusing on being a good wife or a good daughter or a good mother is enough, right? I mean, because you need to be able to express yourself fully. And I think get the whole journey it got me teary-eyed when I first read it because I'm imagining you and how different your life would have been if you didn't just go.
I don't think I would be here. And not to be morbid, I just don't think I physically would have dwindled. I spiritually would have dwindled, but I physically would have dwindled to the point of there was nothing else. And that's one of the things I would say back then. I said, had I not started writing, it would have been a shame if I died because I would not have lived. But the moment I started writing, even like a year into it, I started feeling like, okay, I could die now and not feel so bad. I mean, not that I was trying to go anywhere, but I started thinking, well, each step is purposeful now. Before, the steps were not purposeful.
See, and when you start making those intentional, purposeful choices, you can feel the difference in your life.
Right.
Because you are...
Yeah.
This is what I want to do. Whereas everything else happened by accident. It's happening to me.
It's grounded. It was, I felt like the earth was coming up to meet me when my foot went down.
Yeah.
And then before I was just flailing, I was just trying to figure out, what, who, where. And then when you come into yourself, and there's degrees of knowing yourself. I'm still on that quest. I'm still on that path of trying to figure out like, who am I? But, 30 years later, I know my voice is stronger now than it's ever been,
Which is funny because, your voice has been powerful since you started writing. I mean, but that's not, it's revelation.
It was raw. I think it was raw then. It was very raw when I was, and I had so much to say. I had so much, I was trying to not just convince myself. I was just trying to figure it all out. And it was real. It was real. If not anything else, that was me. I don't begrudge those days or those early works where I'm like, gosh, I was trying to figure it out. But that's what I was doing. I was practicing. I was really trying to practice. You could see me in the poem, trying to figure out the poem out, even try to see even that book, trying to construct the book. But one thing I do really like about Backbone, I like a lot of things about it, but what I love about it is the photo on the front of the...
Oh, gosh, I was hooked. Anything? Yeah. I mean, come on. This is just...
But see, I didn't know who I was until I looked at that photo because I was supposed to be writing something for Jonathan Green, this artist, and he wanted a book about place and home. And I wrote a horrible 21-line poem for his calendar that didn't make it in. And it was after the deadline was up, that's when I wrote Mama's Magic. And Mama's Magic came directly from that photo right there. I didn't know that's who I was. Once I saw that photo, I was like, oh my God. How do you hide from yourself in your own life? Like it's there, hidden in plain sight. But I was an Air Force kid. I really didn't have a sense of place.
Yeah.
I mean, South Carolina was more of a concept than a real thing because I lived all over.
Yeah, my parents very far.
Yeah, my parents were from here, and I was Southern by one generation removed. But I didn't really know place until that photograph.
Wow.
So that's when I kind of got it. Like, oh, this is who I am.
Yeah, here I am.
And that woman, it's so funny that she called right when we were talking.
You can't make that
so
up.
Connected. Because you see how close I am to her. There's almost no demarcation of where my mother is and to where and that's really where my strength, my physical strength and a lot of my spiritual strength came from.
Yeah.
And so she, backbone, maybe it was I think maybe too on the money, but she was literally transferring me that strength from her,
Yeah.
from who she is. And I was tethered to her, and I still am tethered to her in different ways now. But as a 6-year-old in that picture,
I mean, that's an iconic picture. And I didn't know that about this picture, but there was something about it that even as an outsider, you're like, oh, this feels important. Like,
so
you
important.
just stare at it.
There's one birth picture, and then that's probably my next picture. We did not have photographs.
Yeah.
My family was they did not have cameras, did not take care. So that I'm very, I don't know I don't know if it was my father took that picture, but I am so happy that picture exists because it tells pretty much everything about my childhood that you need to know.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so glad you shared that. That makes it even better. Yeah, because the old things are the things that tell you about someone. Well, and I'll get to your second gift, but while we're on this train of talking about your family history and your connection to South Carolina, I found it really compelling how many things you've dropped in your work that helps place you in the context of Greenville and the state.
Yes.
Obviously, I couldn't go to Italy or Washington or New Jersey, but the start of this trip, I went down to Rosemont.
Oh, wow.
And that poem that you wrote to Anne Cunningham really stuck with me. I mean, I was a history major, so I'm always really compelled by anything that draws that far back.
Yes.
But to be in conversation with someone who was on that plantation, your family was there.
Yes.
And it's, 45 minutes from here?
45, 50.
Yeah. So I drove down to Rosemont.
Wow.
And I tried to trace your family's history here. I went to the last remaining building at the Fountain Inn Colored High School that closed in 1954. Your parents were part of the last graduating class. And that was a Rosenwald school.
Yes.
And so I went there, and then I went over to Woodmont High, and I ended up at Canterbury.
Wow, where my mom lives.
And all of it was there. As you start reading, there's a reason you're dropping notes of, First Day Street.
Yes.
There's a reason you reference running track at Woodmont High. There's a reason you wrote that poem to Anne Cunningham. And you talk about Fountain Inn, because that even plays all the way into your latest book. And the history of racism and segregation in state parks. So that's what I spent my time doing before coming here, because I felt like it was really important to understand your connection to this place within the more immediate context. Yeah.
Most people don't follow that trail. Like, it's an intense trail, and it took me a while to, like, the Rosemont piece, which now we're saying is questionable now because we're not sure if it's that particular place. My grandmother did have the last name Cunningham. I just hired a genealogist, so it's getting even deeper.
Oh my
So
gosh.
they're like, well, it may not be that. I forgot two great-grandparents back were not on that plantation. They were owned by another Cunningham in Waterloo. So it's not.
Whoa. Okay.
John Cunningham.
Huh.
So but that's not confirmed yet. Like, I'm just neither here nor there. They just sent me that note. We're thinking that this is so, but I'm sure John Cunningham is related to the You saw how big Waterloo is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very, so I'm like, every time I get a piece of information, I'm like, I don't know. I took my daughter to Rosemont Plantation when we found that connection.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to feel about any of it. But it also grounded me in a really odd way to know, okay, this is where you were owned in Waterloo. And I know families also transferred their enslaved people. So I'm baffled that you went there. And, but also it makes sense to, like, watch that line happen. And that's all the next book will be, is about, actually, from Charleston to Waterloo.
Gosh.
And I just like, but it's invisible. It's so invisible.
Yeah.
I don't understand why it's so invisible. Why am I have to search so hard to find something that's just a few generations back?
And this is what really struck me going on that path. First of all, the way they frame Anne Cunningham as the founder of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association.
Yes.
Who helped restore Mount Vernon to, be a historical site. And yet, there's no reference to plantation on that marker.
No.
It is just the site of where Anne Pamela Cunningham was born.
Right.
She helped found this beautiful ladies' association. No mention of slavery. And there's nowhere to park to look at the historical marker. I had to go in a ditch.
That's right.
And people were probably looking at me like, who is this random dude parking there? But yeah, the history is invisible. They don't even reference the slavery there, that she owned slaves, her family owned slaves. And then you go to Fountain Inn High School that closed in 1954, and only the teacherage
is there.
The building for the principals.
Yeah,
that's
they raised everything. Yeah.
So now you got a church there. I saw some people hanging out on the front yard across the street from the building.
Yeah, the church.
But you're saying here, this is not representative of what it was like. No. So how are people supposed to know unless they dig in the archives, which, let's get real, most people are not going to do that.
Yeah.
So I was able to find pictures of the original campus.
Yes.
But like Rosenwald schools are hugely important to Southern history.
Right. I didn't know that until I was traveling around as a teaching artist. I learned a lot of my history firsthand driving, and reading these markers or seeing. And I'm like, what's a Rosenwald school? That was maybe 18 years ago. I was in South Carolina and finding these still, some of them are preserved, across South Carolina. And come to find out, your parents went to a Rosenwald school. Just to understand that history of how precarious it is even for me to be here. Like my mother, I just realized, was the first person in her family to graduate from high school. And the only reason she graduated is her mother got her out of Waterloo to come to Fountain Inn because there were no colored high schools at the time for her to go to.
And that was the closest opportunity.
That was the closest she could go. And she thought her mother abandoned her and didn't want her. But her mother, who had a third grade education, was trying to give her something she didn't have. So just all the steps it took for me to even exist. And then the fact that I'm going to be a first generation college student. I'm a first generation college student. And I decide to get off the academic track of getting a PhD and decide to do poetry. Are you kidding me? You are literally lost your mind. And I had, because academia wasn't working for me because it was so far. I love school. Don't get me wrong. I love school. Yep. I love learning. But there were so many gaps and so many places and questions that I had that were not being answered by my education. Like I just couldn't, and I was a counselor. I was not a writer then. I was working on a PhD, and I just was like, something's empty. And I had the container of myself, but I didn't have what goes in. I didn't have the content. And when I left that field and started writing poetry, the content became my history. All the history that had been withheld, all the history that my parents didn't even know. Or my parents knew, but I didn't even know enough to ask them. Yeah. Just all of these things, one thing on top of the other. So now it's like, everybody's like, well, you're so place-based. You write so much about your, South Carolina. Well, I am, because I feel now at 60, I don't have enough time left to get everything I need to know.
Yeah.
And that's why I hired a genealogist, and they're like, so she's been sitting I'm like, just please put this all in a report so I can piece this all together, because it will be interesting once it all plays out. If we can find if I can. I mean, I don't know if I will be able to find everybody, but
you can try.
I can do the best I can to get where I need to go. But it's just like the track that you made. It's like, that's what I've been doing. I've been on this. I just feel like a cartographer. I feel like I'm a...
Yeah. And I think it's an undervalued thing. We think because everything's been touched or discovered that there is no discovery yet to be had. And I disagree. I disagree. And in fact, it's even in the places that have been raised and forgotten, that's where the most discovery can happen, but you have to put yourself there.
Right.
And that's, personally, I could never do this project. This is as much about tracing these histories of people and learning for myself as it is about what happens when we come here. Because how could I know the whole picture? I mean, you're 28 years old. This watershed moment is just starting to look back. You know, like you're looking forward
Yes.
because you're trying to find your voice. But in order to do that, you are.
It's the whole Sankofa moment. Like I become that mystical African bird of like, I have to go back because I know nothing. And I realized the more educated I was becoming, the further I was getting from what I really needed to know until I started being able to pour it in into, you know, so getting the MFA was like, yeah, it was great to have the structure and the you know, critical thinking is, you know, it's the best thing. Training your mind is one of the best things you can do. But I also needed something else. I needed the permission to continue this deep work. And that's when all the lineage stuff started coming up.
Yeah.
When I was working on my MFA, it's like, oh gosh, I am not qualified in my own life to really speak on who I am and who we are as a people.
What a realization, though. What a gift to say, well, if I start to know myself.
But it's all the things that were dismissed. It's all the things that it's hard to find in the book. Like in the sad story is that many of the people I could have interviewed and talked to are already gone now. Now that I finally got, oh, here are my and my marching orders started then, but you can see with each book, I become a more skilled investigator. I become a stronger poet. I become not afraid of the mystical qualities that I possess as a woman and as a human being. And you can see that the voice gets like unapologetic in a way that I didn't have in my you know, there was no way to have it back then, but I was still, I was there.
The start.
It was like the marker. If you were looking at a map,
you are, I mean, you could say coming into your own, going into your own, each book. And that's why I just don't, and it is difficult to read so many books, but I can't ignore the beginning for any writer or musician. How can you know a musician if you didn't listen to their first mixtapes? You know what I mean?
It's true. No, it's
and
true.
in some ways, many artists don't start claiming themselves or come into their own. They actually drift even further because they lose sight of what it is they actually are trying to do.
Right.
So you hear those origins and you're like, wow, this is
that.
great. Even if it's raw, but then it just gets shallower and shallower. And that's not what you did. And that's why I love your writing.
Thank you. I'm
It
trying not
deep.
to.
It just keeps going.
I'm trying not to lose that thread because I do know that there's fire and there's something there of why the opening, like that thing open. I want that. And, you know, I never know where it's going to go. I don't want to get too cerebral about it because the fact that, I mean, I do put a lot of work in it, but I also really have to mine those territories that are not institutionalized. Yeah. And that is very different. Like right now I'm mining my, you know, when I'm mining my foremothers, like what they did, these are people who are illiterate. These are people who never could have read a book or read. When people say, oh, I found my grandmother's or my great-grandmother's letters in the attic. And that quilt right there will be the only letter in the attic. You see on that blue and white quilt?
Yeah.
That's my great-grandmother right there.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. That is her writing right there. Wow. That would be what she... Yeah. That's all I have. I have 2 quilts. I have a red and white one, and I have this one. And so now I'm reading the quilts like they were letters.
And you've talked about this in interviews for a long time, that your mother, your great-grandmother, grandmother, like these are the smartest people you know. You have to look at intelligence differently than we do. Right. Or a lot of us do, not everybody. Yeah. I mean, no, you just got to think, well, look at all that they did with their lives.
So resourceful and so powerful. And I have to... it's my grandmother's sewing machine.
Oh my gosh.
Think about how this woman right here, and that's her up there, was an artist. she embellished everything. And she was doing things, she was doing mixed patterns before mixed patterns were a thing. Like, and I look back at her stuff and I said, how did she know? She was that creative mind. She just was. And so I don't have to move very far to think about who these women were and what they gave me. And I realized even though maybe my schooling maybe tainted me in some way because, I started following down a certain role, but I also can feel their influence of who they were and how they made it up as they went along, and also their convictions that they have. I'm not my mother. I'm not those women, but I come from those women.
Yeah, and it wasn't always inside of you. And how great it is to realize that.
Yeah.
You didn't just start becoming an artist. I mean, you were born one. Look who you came from.
Yeah, exactly. And
exactly. The older I get, the more I think about art, like creating a life is as creative as anything. Like it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be.
We look at everything as, it has to. Are you a painter? Are you a rapper? Are you a singer? Are you a guitarist? It's what about the ways in which you're creative and just living and building a life and changing and growing and adapting? Like all of that stuff to me takes what it takes to be an artist.
It's creativity. I think in America, sometimes there's more of walls that we put up about what creative means. And people will think, oh, I'm not in the art field, I'm not creative. I'm like, you are creating all the time. Like we are being, solutions, and, there's just so many ways humans figure out the next day to the next day. And then we discount it or put it in a certain box in order for it to be counted. And that's how I feel about these women. I want these women to be counted. I want to account for them. I want my work to account for them. They do not need to be lost or raised like those buildings, gone. That's why I talk to my mother as much as I can. She's 87. And right now, I have so many projects. I need to just stop because but this project that is stemming from being Poet Laureate of Greenville, I decided I'm doing these 10 city parks and pairing poets with 10 parks, and they write about the parks. And then one of the parks is named is for Ella Mae Logan. And I said, who is she? And I looked at, of course, this Black woman face came up, and I said, oh, I'm gonna write about her. And come to find out, she's this spinster woman, never married, but her sister was the woman who started the Phyllis Wheatley Center here in Greenville.
Wow.
And I'm like, her dad was a minister. She never married, but she was a 30-year teacher at all Black high school, Sterling High School, home ec teacher, never sent a kid to the principal. And so I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, And then, so when I go to the park to read the poem in front of the park, I realized my grandmother lived right around the block from there on Haney Street. And I go, so what I'm doing now, I'm gonna pick like 15 to 20 African-American women from 1850 to like 1970. And the book is going to be called Kin Keepers. And it's just a profile. It's going to be a poem or two. And telling these women's stories. Because they have the park, but there's no picture of her. And I'm like, so I feel like I'm doing this kind of quilting thing of the women of my family, but also the women of the city. Or maybe even the county or the upstate. I think it's not just the city. I think it's going to be upstate. I think I'm going to do it from Lawrence to here. But
oh my gosh, my mind's exploding with it. Like, I love this. And this is why I just so appreciate you and how you get to your writing in this project, because it starts with, who is this person? And how many people we miss because you're just not willing to go further. Like, I didn't know about Elizabeth Jennings before Rosa Parks.
Right.
Right. I didn't know about Farmville High School in Virginia leading up to Brown v. Board and that walkout until I went to Tuskegee because of the Robert Moton connection. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's all tracing these things that are connected.
But they're there.
But these women that you're going to highlight, I mean, I'd be willing to bet I probably don't know hardly any of them.
And most people don't. That's the thing. Most people wouldn't even know. And I'm like, and this is like, these stellar, there were like Yeah, Lizella. I don't know if you ever heard of Lizella Augusta Moore. She's a poet. She's a poet from Pickens. She taught at South Carolina State, late 1800s, early 1900s. She wrote a whole book. She was outspoken about race. I'm like, and I found her in my last book. So I think I wrote a Quensaba to her, because she's like the first African American woman photographed with a typewriter.
Wow.
That's the only picture that exists of her. And I'm just like, so it's just like, how in the world, like, they're not. So if education were already saying this history is not important, this is not even surface. This is deeper stuff that needs to be known. This goes, not just our prerequisites of like, Martin Luther King, Phyllis, with the 10, whatever 10 you got. I mean, we got 10 people.
At this point, you might as well not teach it because it does such a disservice to the history.
Right.
I mean, when I was in college, I made my own curriculum because I had to have every subject intertwined. So the same time I took the history of the modern civil rights movement, I was taking a political science class on the Supreme Court cases related to civil rights.
Powerful.
And when I was taking a rhetorical analysis of the civil rights movement, I was also taking a history class that wove that in. I was taking a poli-sci class that dealt with
as it should be.
American Indian law, as they called it.
Right.
I was also taking a class on the American West with an indigenous professor. But that's because I had to do that. Because otherwise I would have gone to Michigan. I was like, what a waste. Because I would have never gotten... And oh my gosh, if I had majored in business, I would have learned nothing about history.
But that's so smart, and that's the way my mind works, and I never got that. I never got it. But I would have understood history so much more if it was dovetail in those ways, it was intersected in those ways. Like, so you understand the context of how this comes into this. I never, and I'm still doing that. I'm still like supplementing my education with the things that I did not get. So when I read a Isabel Wilkerson cast or, the warmth of other sons, I just go, oh my gosh, here it is laid out, not in a way that is so distancing the way I got these teachers who were just doing timelines and just plugging in. It was just meaningless.
Yeah.
But if you start bringing in groups of people and stories,
that's what it is. And also it's accounting for a record of people.
Right.
That, like when I was in Pikeville, I learned about Effie Waller-Smith. Have you heard about this poet?
No. I don't know.
First African-American poet published in, maybe Kentucky. I don't want to misspeak on that, but this was like late 1800s.
Oh, okay.
And her history is very well known there. In eastern Kentucky. She ended up, either she was born in Wisconsin or she moved to Wisconsin after that. But the point is, who thinks about coal country and a black woman poet?
Right. Especially
at that turn of the century. And I'm sitting here, my friends tell me about Effie Waller-Smith, and then I'm like, where is she in the national discourse of important writers? And what she could say or has said that gives you a glimpse into a place that you have an association with of a certain type of person and a certain type of history. Right? And I think Appalachia struggles with that a lot.
Yes.
That's why the Appalachian poets are really important. Frank X. Walker has been monumental in understanding. Like, I found so many writers through finding him when I moved to Appalachia, including Ramika, who you and her are heart connected on the accounting for stories. So, it's just, that project sounds awesome. And really important because now, if people are not going to get that history, someone has to make it come together.
I have so many other things that are before that, but I just now with my brain, I just said, write it down, write the list of women. You will get to it in due time. But it's important, and it's important for this. I think it's important for South Carolina. I also think it's important for school children as well and teachers. I feel like it could be a really great part of the curriculum. So but I want to make it, I want to make it very accessible. Like I really I just want them to be able to like see this, like a picture, a photograph, a poem or two, a bio, like just, yes.
Yeah, pictures are powerful.
Pictures. Pictures.
To be able to look at someone. When I saw the portrait of Effie Waller-Smith, I was just like,
I love that name.
I'll
be looking her up.
I'll
be looking her
so
up.
actually, the other gift I almost got you was her book, but I didn't. I try to find things that people haven't read, and I know you wouldn't have read JVE.
I know I have.
So it was between Effie Waller-Smith and we're talking a lot about history. So I want to. The next gift I got you actually isn't out yet. It's coming out in 12 days.
Oh, wow.
Today's the 8th? Yeah?
Yes.
12 days, I believe. And it's a UNC Press book, which I want to shout out because they do have some remarkable history books, untold stories. And this one is called Searching for Dr. Harris. So I want to...
Searching for
Dr. You don't get to unwrap this one.
Okay.
But I just, because of your interest in history and these stories that are not widely known that deserve it, your work with Praise Songs for Dave the Potter, that's what made me get you this book. So I'm going to send it to you when it comes out.
Thank you. Margaret.
But this is a physician.
Yeah.
In the 1800s.
In the 1800s?
A black man physician with no black medical school yet. And he goes around the country. He's doing these apprenticeships. And he ends up serving for the Union as a physician in Virginia.
This is remarkable.
I've
never heard of him.
Same. And I was searching for books. No pun intended.
Yeah.
I was searching for Dr. Harris in that way. And it wasn't necessarily to give you a gift. I was looking for my own reading.
Oh, wow.
And I just thought you'd connect with it. So also I found this article, and he ran for lieutenant governor. So here's...
Of North Carolina?
Virginia.
Of Virginia.
So there's the ticket that he's on. So,
Get out. This
is at a
crazy.
time where they were blocking so many opportunities for black people to learn.
Lieutenant governor of Hampton.
And then you can't read this. There is an adjoining, I think, written description. But there's some of his autobiographical letters.
What?
That I found online.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, man, this guy.
This is beautiful.
He goes to Iowa. He goes to Cleveland. And he was also in Haiti. I think he began in Haiti, but they didn't have the medicine that he wanted to study, but he learned how to treat fevers there.
Oh my gosh.
If you look up this, I think you'll love this book.
Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is amazing. So to find someone you've never heard of or...
It's
remarkable.
It's so, it does something to you. It's hard to describe.
Especially when you start thinking the time period they were doing it in. How were you doing that? How did you become literate? And then not only become literate, then you go on to get a medical. I don't. Yeah. It blows the mind.
Yeah. I mean, there was no system in place for him to do this, and he did it anyway. And I think that goes to what you're talking about with quilting, right? How you're an artist, how you're educated.
Right.
There's a lot of ways to do it. So.
Oh wow! Thank you.
I'll get that to you when it gets out.
Wow.
Yeah.
The human spirit is just, I try to place myself back. For some reason, the 1800s, I always go back to the 1800s. It's an odd part of my being. But just to think how people not only survived, but made their way and made the world a better place by them being in it. And like you were saying the word before, courage. But I imagine people didn't really see themselves as courageous. They were just doing what they felt compelled to do.
And again, another word that becomes almost lustful, but we talked about Willa Cather on the phone a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But she believed that desire is the basis of all creation. And so desire to learn.
Right.
Desire to make something, art.
Yeah.
That's why Dave the Potter, right?
Yes.
David Drake. That was I'd never heard of him until your book.
Really?
Which is a huge loss, a huge miss, what an incredible artist.
I didn't discover him until I was late 40s and just going. It's right when I moved back here. And I was working on other stuff. And then here comes Dave. And Dave had plenty Dave does not need me or never needed me to write about him.
Yeah.
I needed Dave. Like, that's the whole point, is that I needed to know who Dave was. And I needed to know who Dave was when I was in elementary, but I didn't. So now it's like, so what do I do with that? Do I continue to write so other people and maybe young people can find him earlier than I did? Because it is a remarkable story. And these, I call them right now, I have the South Carolina sons, but the daughters they're coming to me too. But, you know, Pegleg Bates, the one-leg tap dancer who was from Fountain Inn, and his gymnasium no longer is there either. But there's just so much to say. There's so much to be said. And who's going to say it if we don't? Because it's lost. There's no book on him. There's a children's book. And it's not even, you know, I won't say neither here nor there, but it was the only book that really existed. But there's got to be something to be stand-ins for these great people. And I guess I am, South Carolina just keeps saying, it just feels like they're all just standing in line like, Glenis, when you get finished with this one, then it's this one.
They're all waiting at the door.
No,
you know what I mean? It's like, here, come on in.
Come on in. Just, and I'm like, okay, well, let me just write it down, and I promise you, I will get to it. And the State Park book really was not the book I was trying to write.
See, and I do want to get to that.
Yes.
Because, so first of all, I want to say,
yes,
for you and Carolyn Harper New, until we got this new shipment of books for the event at City Lights, we had sold every copy of those two books, hers and then The Song of Everything.
What?
Like, we cannot hold on to them, to the point that I had to hide them for the next couple of days, because it was so easy for me to sell. First of all, shouts out, the design is beautiful. It's a great looking book. But when I tell them where it came from, they're just like,
Thank you for her book, too. I'm still reading it. I'll be finished with it by Sunday.
Yeah.
It's a very intense, lovely book.
But I think that the State Park book, The Song of Everything, is in its way still following that line.
But here's the thing, though, Matt. I did not think that. I thought, oh, yeah, let's have a departure. Julie and I can go and have these experiences. And of course, while I'm at the thing, I'm going to write a poem for the park. Like, that's just me. But then to post about it and say, oh, I am writing that. And then so the Good Printed Things, Lib Ramos, say, oh, we should make this a book. And then when we make it such a little book, it's like we did want it to be a small book. And that book just flies. So I can't keep copies myself. I'll like, Liz, how many copies? Can I get another 100 from you? I can't keep them for a month. And it's just a little small book that doesn't cost much. I have had administrators buy 70 copies in one. I'm buying them for all gifts and I can't keep a hold of it myself. And I just go, I don't know what it is about this book, but I did not go to it I didn't know I was on that thread until I realized my mother making that statement. You could not have gone to Bears Mountain. It was segregated.
That blew my mind.
You could not. It blew mine because she was my mother, and I didn't know it. I was like.
And when did she tell you that?
She told me that last year.
That's wild.
She told me right before the book was. I was like, right while I was writing the book, and I like, Mom, you couldn't have gone to Paris Mountain. It was segregated. And then I found out about Leroy Smith and the Pleasant Ridge Park, and then when you start reading the whole history of the South Carolina State Parks. It tells the history of America. Like, of course it tells the history of America. And there I am, right again. It's this aligned with everything else.
You're accidentally consistent too. You know what I mean? but isn't that a product of, like, once you start on that path of learning and the historical research that you've done and wanting to learn about yourself, it does make sense that would happen even if you weren't intending it to. Because you just kind of followed, like, this is what I'm going to do.
I was trying to, not to say I was trying to write a lighter book, but I did realize, I said, this is more a general audience book. Like, can be sold in the gift stores.
But it's accessible.
It's accessible, but there's still that thread. Like, the thread is there.
It goes deep.
It's undeniable. And then I did want it to be playful as well. I wanted these poems for Julian. I wanted, I wanted the sheer curiosity of us, you know, when
Yeah.
we're at these parks. But at the same time, hand in hand, it's there. I was not, you know, I should have expected it. I should have expected it. But why would you expect it when you're in your life, living your life, even though you know those things happen? And I think what's happening for me is that it's always a constant reminder that everything's connected. And talking to my mother is that, okay, you really want to understand the connection? Yes, read the history books. Talk to your mother. Talk to your mother. Get her to tell you about her experiences. Because number one, she's going to be, I don't know how long she's going to live. Her mother lived to be 109, but she might live forever. But still, you need to know these connections because once she's gone, you don't get that. It's not written. You are the one holding this. You are the keeper. I'm the keeper. And I'm keeping myself, but I'm also trying to keep a community. Like, I'm really trying to figure it out. I'm really trying to figure out how this, and some, you know, people are like, oh, that stuff doesn't matter. Or so many people, history doesn't matter. Or why are you always going back to that? I'm like, how do you not go back to that? How are you not, why are you not up at night thinking about these things? I mean, I guess I am I guess all writers are curious people, but I just like, I don't understand how you're not bothered by it.
It's a shame, but the least we can do, and again, I'm not a writer, but I have the same curiosity. And what I hope to do, and the reason I use the language of Welty and parting a curtain, is because that's what history class was. It kept me up at night. I was chugging caffeine till 4 a.m. because I felt like I was making up for a whole childhood devoid of real curiosity. Now, don't get me wrong. There were things I enjoyed learning about, but it was more like I never found that yearning to learn, where I just couldn't stop. But see, and there's a bigger purpose to it because of that. You know, the James McBride line in his latest book, where he says everything got everything to do with everything.
Yes,
it's the vernacular way of saying
all of that.
Yeah, you can speak on the high language, but like once you learn history, once you read, even all you writers, the thread between you and Ramika, and then the folks in Mississippi,
she really feels kindred. Like,
yeah, all of you are connected in some way to me.
Yeah,
and I try to follow that because what great power there is in seeing the kindred spirits in front of you. You know.
Well, I mean, what you do is powerful. I mean, and you know the level and the volume that you read, and then also paying so close attention to the trail, like that is. You know, and one of the things that I would love to do, and I haven't done, and I never got to meet Lucille Clifton. She died before, and I got to study with her. But her trek to me, and it's one of the books that I put on my list. Her book, Generations, a memoir.
Yeah. And
it's just like, but I feel like that's what I've been doing. I haven't physically done what you just did with me. Like I've gone 2 places in my writing. Like I take my mom to Fountain Inn. I go, but I have not physically done like the Lucille Clifton trek. Like I just think probably going to Maryland and going to upstate New York, you know, going to the places where she taught and would probably shift me. And then they have the Lucille Clifton house now, like all of that.
Which is amazing. Yeah, you got to do it.
I know. I need to just take some time and go, and because there's not a lot of people that I want a pilgrimage to, but she is the number one person that I would do a pilgrimage.
Well, maybe we should use this opportunity to start with the books on the bed.
Okay.
Lucille Clifton. Do we want to start with that?
Sure.
Yeah. So tell me about this one.
So Generations is a memoir, and it's a very slim memoir, but it's a hybrid. It's written essay, poems, and letters. And I found it when I was working on my MFA, and I just didn't know you could. Number one, I didn't know you could. I'm pretty sure my last 2 books are what they are because of Generations.
Wow.
Because she was definitely piecing together her history. And she was doing it from, I can't remember if it's Alabama or Mississippi, but she talks about her great-grandmother, Caroline. They say Caroline. And she walked from wherever it was in the Deep South to Virginia. Like there's yes. And the one other thing in this book that really is the reason why it's the book that speaks to me is that she talks about her being the original African ancestor, knowing who your ancestor was, who got off the boat. And when I read that in that book, I never had any recognition of my history in that way. Number one, I had so many people denying being African, which number one, like, because there was so much internal shame around, like, so I was just trying to like make the connection. We're African. I hadn't taken my DNA test knowing that we're from Nigeria and Cameroon. But to really start thinking of the original ancestor, I said, how powerful is it to not only know that, to know that person and know that name of that person. And so that is what stood out to me in that book. And Lucille Clifton changed and shifted. I'm sure after reading that, I just said, oh, I just got more tools to piece together my history.
Isn't that such a great, like, we all need help with what we're doing.
Right.
And you got to look to these people you admire, and to just have that in front of you to give you the tools to say, I can do this now. Right. Even more of the energy to keep going with it. Yeah.
And the fact that so I guess was she at Howard? Is that where she went to Howard? She didn't finish. But she gets a letter in this book. She gets a letter from her father, who is functionally literate. And she puts the letter in the book, and he's just saying, I think he called her Lucille Man. Lucille Man, I'm so proud of you. You know, and it's just to have that piece. So what she's doing in there with that letter authenticated like where I come from. Like having both of my parents could write, but but barely. My mother was not a big writer. My dad very intelligent. Right. My mother's very intelligent too. But it affirmed something of like, my father's writing is important. Even though this writing is not standard English, this letter, this document, that I got from him while I was in college. And it was just all of these ways she was bridging a gap. Lucille Clifton is doing stuff academically, but she's also doing stuff mystically that is so powerful in that book that I would say it was one of the books that oriented me in a way that I wasn't ready for.
Wow.
And I didn't even know I needed. And that's why Lucille Clifton, and I put her collected works, and that is here. I put that's my Bible. The collected poems, it's just my Bible, because it's one of those things. I play that game where if I'm like stuck, I just open the book and just read where she is. So those books both go hand in hand, and I can't keep up with Lucille. I can't keep up with her. She was she was like eons. And I just hate that I didn't get to study with her, but she went to Walnut Grove Plantation. I don't know. Do you know that poem? And I forget the name of the poem, and she doesn't necessarily title it. But she goes to Walnut Grove Plantation in Spartanburg, South Carolina. She goes on the tour. They never mention slavery. And in the poem, at the end of the poem, it goes, here lies, here lies, here lies, here lies, here lies. That's, she's the master of compression.
Yeah.
But so from the memoir to her poems, I don't know of any other author that has done for me as a Black woman who defies categories than Lucille Clifton. And I would have to put both of those books in there, because the Generations, of course, is not in her collected works, but
they're tied.
They're tied.
I mean,
and she's the one who called me out, like that. Won't you celebrate poem? I know that Ramika had in hers Book of Light. That is the poem that it's like, won't you celebrate with me what I've
Yeah.
That is the poem that said, I was sick on the bed and watching Bill Moyers, and she was on the Dodge Poetry Festival.
Wow.
And she says that poem, and I go, I am going to do poetry for the rest of my life. Won't you come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed? What?
Huh.
Who are you? What? It was like this woman, that poem, that woman reached out. I'm living in, I don't know which direction it is. I'm living in Simpsonville, which is the town over. Married, girls are 2. I'm sick, and I hear that poem, and I'm going, that was the lightning strike. Lucille, she's the lightning strike.
Oh my gosh.
She's the lightning strike.
Wow. That makes it even more. I'm getting chills.
That is the lightning strike. That poem was, and I didn't understand it was a clarion call. There are so many Black poets who will, this is not internet time. We were not on the internet going, oh, that poem, did you hear it? It's so dope. It was, if you happen to be at Dodge Poetry Festival, this is how disconnected I was. I realized it was a festival, but I didn't realize I could have actually go to a poetry festival. I was not in that mind. I just saw Bill Moyers, PBS, and I think Coleman Barks was on there too, doing some Rumi, powerful stuff. And when I heard that poem, it shaped my life. And then now, I'm sure if I went to Furious Flower, and I was thinking about doing this, if I open my set up with, y'all, I'm just so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to be alive, because most people know that I've been fighting for my life. And I want to say that Lucille Clifton's poem is the one, and if I say it, won't you come celebrate with me, that every day something, the whole audience would say it with me. I know if I open my set like that, and I either do a few poems, and then I'm going to end with my poem for Julian at the state park, I know that the whole audience will understand that this is a full circle moment. So those would be the top 2. I think she's underrated. I mean, I think she's getting more and more attention now academically, but the fact that she chose not to finish college, and she was self-taught, and she is the master. What she does with compression, I can't write like her. I don't understand how you write like that.
She really is so good. And again, I always credit people who are willing to share something with me that even if they think, oh, he might not like it, I don't believe in that. Mm-hmm. Just tell me about Lucille Clifton. Tell me about something that I don't have to identify with it directly.
Right.
I just read an interesting book from 1926 that was so of the time about a cat lady witch in 1920s England who is 47, isn't married, and she gets transferred from her dad to her brother to help him run his household, because what else is she good for? And then she just moves to a small town and starts living her life. And the whole thing about being a witch is to claim a life of your own. And so her not going to college and her writing these poems, it's
having the extra digits on her hands, and
it is authenticity to the max, right? You're not being taught how to be a poet.
She knows.
You are.
She already knows, and that's what her conviction turned me into. I don't understand it, and I don't know why. I was supposed to study with her at Atlanta Center for the Arts, but she had cancer.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that. Yeah,
but I really wish I would have been able to just sit in her presence. But I do feel like I'm in her presence all the time.
Yeah, she's always there.
She's always there.
I talked about this with Ramika. We accidentally took a selfie where the picture of Lucille Clifton on her wall was in between us. You know what I mean? I have a feeling she's going to be on a lot of the beds. That her books are going to be on many.
Yeah, I wondered if the Generations one would come on the bed, because it's a lesser known book of hers.
See, but I love that you picked that in the same way that Ramika picked Home by Toni Morrison.
Right.
There's so many people that are going deeper into the catalogs of writers, because I do feel like we get caught up with certain popular books, even by writers that are getting more acclaim.
Right.
But as it is with you, you can't understand
I
your
wish I had-
newest books without backbone. So
That's right.
you can't.
Right.
Yeah.
I will find it. It's somewhere. I'll be able to find Generations somewhere. But it's such a slender. It's a slender book. It is. And you would think, oh, it's nothing, but it's everything. It is so full of. It's a document. I mean, she gave permission for our. I should say, I felt that she was saying,
Yeah.
this is important. You can do this. And that's what I got from that book more than anything. I just felt like, oh man, why was she, she had, what did she have, 5 or 6 kids? I'm like, how does she just know that this is integral to what needs to be? Like, she just had this knowing. And I want to have that knowing, not just for myself, but for others. I want to leave a trail, a bread, and she's
You're doing it. You're doing it.
It's hard to see it because, when you live it and you write it and you don't know, like I've forgotten more than I've ever remembered. I've been to so many, I don't remember. I don't remember most of the things I've done. I don't, and I'm.
But isn't it like we were talking about with the scene in Nashville in the 90s? You don't know when something's happening necessarily in the middle of it. Do you think Lucille Clifton knew all the people that she shook like like that shift happened? I don't know that any writer really does.
Right.
But I also find the language curious that you just used with that slender book being everything and how you just wrote the song of everything in that little slender book. I mean,
well, thank you for
I'm so glad you shared that because it gives even more power to your journey as a poet. Like, yeah, what if you didn't hear that? What if you didn't act? What if you didn't go? Like, there's
why
so
did
much.
I have the? I did watch a lot of PBS back in the day, but I was just like literally on my sick couch. Like I really had no energy. I had no whatever. And then that came on, and when I heard that was the first. So I will have to back it up and say it's not the first poem that activated me. Mm-hmm. And I put on my list too, which is a little bit of cheating because it's not a book. It's a poem because this author does not have a book. And
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. The poem is 1,968 Winners by Jackie Early. And I was in the 5th grade in Aviano, Italy when it's a Black History program. And 5th grade, and they were taking us all over to the high school, and the high schoolers were doing a celebration, dancing, singing, for Black History. And I was kind of nonplussed because I was like, really want to be at recess. But in the back of the auditorium, sitting on the floor, and a 10th grader, her name was Yolanda Walker, got up to do what I didn't know at the time was a poem. She was going to get up and do a poem. She was dressed. She had on a black fro, a black turtleneck, black jeans, black boots, black beret.
Yeah.
Already, the poem had already come in. Like there were no words. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
She walked off. She had a swag. She was walking out. And she says, got up this morning feeling good and black. Thinking black thoughts, did black things, played all my black records, put on my best black clothes, minded my own black business, walked out my black door, and Lord have mercy. White snow.
I was wondering if the performer in you was going to come out. I love it.
And that was Jackie Early's poem. And as a 5th grader, I mean, everybody laughed. I mean, it was because there's repetition. It's funny. But as a 5th grader, I was going, that poem's not funny. And that poem stuck right there. And I carried that poem. I didn't tell my parents about it. I didn't tell nobody else about it. I carried that poem. After I'm 28, 29, doing poetry, moved to Asheville, found Bob Fall's Poetry of Life. He said, you got to learn 100 poems. Handed me a manual. I take the manual, open the manual. What is the first poem?
Stop.
I'm not going to stop.
Oh my gosh.
Got up this morning feeling good and black. It was the first poem I memorized. And I was like, Oh my God. I did not know the title of that poem. I did not know it was 1,968 winners. I did not know it was talking about 1968. I did not know it was talking about assassination. I did not, Martin Luther King and, all the Black leaders that were assassinated. I did not know. I knew it.
Yeah. It's a deeper kind of knowing.
It was a deeper kind of knowing. So it was that full circle moment of so that was the first time. Edward Hirsch says there is what we call an initiation poem. It's that poem that opens what he calls the unembarrassed place of ourselves. And I think his was a Bronte poem, No Coward's Mine or something. He was in the attic. He describes the moment so it's so funny when you encounter these moments, you remember it like it was yesterday. And that's how I remember 1,968 winners being. I was sitting there, 500 other kids, but literally nobody else was in the auditorium but me.
Wow.
And I knew something. I knew the earth was shaking, and I knew I would never be the same. Now, it took another 20 years, was it 20?
Yeah.
Close to 20 years.
Wow.
For that poem to go, I've been following you. I've been waiting. I mean, I knew it probably impacted my writing, when I got my journal. So there's like 3 poems that did that. And so 1,968 Winners was the poem that just, and I literally was at many years later, I guess I had written Under the Sun, which is one of my darkest books. And I was on a panel in Florida, and it was people talking about their books and stuff. And I was telling the story I just told you, and it was Adrian Castro, poet, was looking at me like in disbelief as I was telling him. He was just, and I was like, "What? How have I offended this man? How have I offended him?" He came out after. He said, "Jackie Early's my next door neighbor."
What? That's wild.
He lives in Miami. He's like, "She's my next door neighbor. I'm going to go home and tell her how much that poem meant to you." Jackie Early, we become pen pals. She blurbs that book.
I love this so much.
And she called me like 2 weeks ago. She called me a few weeks ago. She's still alive. Now she's in Georgia. I got to go see her. I know that I need to go see her because she's about the age of my mother. Yeah. And I need to go see her.
Yeah, you have to. Oh my gosh.
But to me, that's how poetry. So I wanted to include that in another one, which is not a book also. It's 3 poems. 1,968 Winners, Won't You Celebrate, Lucille Clifton, and then White Comedy by Benjamin Obadiah Zephaniah, who is a Jamaican poet. I guess you would call him a dub poet. And I was in London doing a tour. What?
Is this the poem you talk about in the prologue here?
What?
Yeah, this is it. I actually marked this.
What?
That White Comedy.
Yes.
On a postcard in London. I was wondering if you were going to talk about this, because this is in Backbone.
I haven't read that in a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the last thing you say. Stopped me in my tracks and turned me totally around. I began to live a deeper life. I marked this.
So those 3 poems. So, yeah. I saw a postcard, and for some reason, I think I was living in Black Mountain at the time. Blaine and I had divorced, and I was living below the poverty level. I mean, it was rough, but I was determined to live the life I needed to live. And I turned the postcard, and I realized I could write to this dude because it was his agent's address. So I wrote a letter to him, and got a letter back.
That's amazing.
And we became pen pals for the rest of our lives. And then there's a moment where so he'd be in South Africa and call me. He's a Black Brit, Glenis. And he'd be in France and call me. One day he calls me. He says, "I'm in the United States." I said, "You are, Benjamin. Where are you?" He said, "I'm in Johnson City." I said, "You are an hour away from me." And he said, "Can we get together?" I was like, I said, "I'm sorry. This is a girls' weekend." And I was very fierce about guarding my time with and I said, I'm taking care of my girls this weekend and they have soccer. I'm mad for soccer. I'm mad for soccer. So he comes to my girls' soccer game.
I love this so much. But isn't that poetry? Like,
It
to
was
make those
complete.
connections?
And here's the long story short of that. So last September, I reach out, I inbox him and just said, "Hey, Benjamin, how are you doing? I hadn't heard from you in a while." And we would go years without talking, but I still have all the letters. I have all our letters that we've written that he wrote to me. And he said, and he's been on, what is that? Peaky Blinders? He's on
Really?
Peaky Blinders. He's on several,
Oh, it's one of my favorite shows.
yeah, he's in there. He's on several.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I go, "I hadn't heard from you, just want to check in." And he's like, yeah, he got some post at a university and I've got obligations and blah, 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 blah. And then, I kid you not, a month later, he dies of a, what is it called? Blastoma. Well, it's in the brain thing, within 6 weeks. And I don't think in the inbox, I don't think I told him about my cancer. I was going to tell him, but I didn't want to tell him during inbox. So I was going to reach out to him again. But I never got to tell him I was struggling. I've been fighting for my life. Yeah. And literally, I am driving home from something and I get here and I look and it's like, he was a vegan. I mean, he was the last person on the planet that I thought would... I think by the time when he was diagnosed, it was either 6 to 8 weeks he was gone.
Jeez.
So I don't know what all that means, but I don't know if it's fair to put it in the books, but I wanted to preface the books by these 3 poems.
You have to. I mean, this makes so much sense, right? Because I remember reading this and being like, "Oh, I'm definitely going to ask," but I figured you'd bring it up. But I really love that what you're doing by not having books. You're breaking these rules because there is no
I'm
rule.
sorry.
There are no rules.
I should ask. I said I should have the books, but I don't really have them.
but also like these poems, there are certain songs that have carried more weight than any album I've ever listened to. On my way here, I listened to a couple of that are my Bible.
Yes.
They are the things that center me because I struggle sometimes to maintain the path,
Right.
I lose my own way.
Yeah.
And it's not a whole album. It's not a whole book sometimes. I actually have Emily Dickinson's poem, "I'm Nobody, Who Are You?"
Yeah.
in my room, on my desk, because it reminds me what I'm really doing this for. And what a dreary life to live it for others. And that's why that book, Lolly Willows, about the cat lady witch woman.
I got to read that.
It's one of the best books of the 20th century.
Really? I got to read it.
And it couldn't be more relatable to now because of the way that we judge folks who don't have these common characteristics of what a human is, to have children, to make a house, all this stuff. And she says, "You know what? Screw it." And I did that in a lot of ways, not as a woman. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are different circumstances, but I had to just jet out and live my own way.
To live your life.
And because if I was suffocating under the weight of doing everything that seemed expected. Moving to Franklin, it's less than 5,000 people. People thought I was crazy. But it is sometimes the smallest things that make you make the biggest decisions. And that's why I love that you brought these poems.
Yeah.
Because I think, first of all, so many people are going to relate to those awakenings. But I love that. Can you say that again about the unembarrassed part of yourself?
Oh, yeah. That's what Edward Hirsch said. The initiation poem is that poem that opens that unembarrassed part of yourself.
Because isn't that what prevents so many people from doing things? They're afraid to be embarrassed.
That shame.
They're afraid to reveal themselves because then it's all out there on the line.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's necessary.
It's necessary. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so those 3, one, Jackie Early, she didn't have a book. And she says she's been writing on it. And then last time I talked to her, she said it got lost in storage. And I'm just like, oh, I would have found a way to get your book published. So that is just another marker of who really inspired me in a way.
And I love that because how many people that were good at something don't have a book about them? Weren't able to put their stuff out there.
But with that one poem,
wow.
it's just that Those 3 poems. So I really, if I ever did a documentary, I would do it on those 3 poems.
Yeah, I hope you do. Gosh, I love that. So what, after those 3, and we got the Lucille books,
Yes.
what's the next one?
The next one is, what the microphones are standing on. I actually have those. They're 2. They're actually coffee table books, but they're by Jonathan Green. Do you know Jonathan Green?
Because of you. Truly, yeah.
So Gullah Images, and then the latest one is Gullah Spirit. So Gullah Images. So the reason I chose those books, and they're more pictorial, so I know I'm breaking rules, but it's just like the way I started learning about place was before Lucille Clifton, it was Jonathan Green. And I would see an image like this. So I grew up, when we came back to the South, and when I was 14, we would be driving through, we were coming from New Jersey to the South. My dad got orders, and we were coming back to the South. Literally, I saw billboards. There were Sambos on billboards. All I know was derogatory.
Yeah.
And then my parents had to explain what that was. But I remember that 13, 14, being inundated by negative images of Black folks. Whether it was film, Step and Fetch It, whether it was mammy paraphernalia dolls and whatever. And that does something to a young Black girl's psyche, to see this negative depiction of who we were. And it was in my high school, it was everywhere. And when I finally encountered Jonathan Green, his images started undoing that work. And he had postcards, he had calendars, and then he had this book right here. And literally just flipping through the collection, seeing this South Carolina-based celebratory African-American ritual, traditions, just dress, grounded me in place. And it was like that photograph. It was that photograph. It was that photograph.
Yeah.
So he's the one who told me to write the poem about place. I couldn't write it until I saw that photograph.
Wow.
But he was doing this. He was already way-making in a way that I'm like, we are honorable. And of course I knew we were honorable. Of course I knew there was dignity there. But I was not getting it. I wasn't getting it. And he was one of the first people, not a writer though, a visual artist, but it's a book. And that book started to be an anodyne. You know, it was undoing all the toxicity that I had.
I'm so glad you brought that in, because image is tied to narrative. And the way we see ourselves is how we write ourselves. This is really important because you're saying something that has been a huge thread, even with my last podcast. Like, I remember being in Mississippi talking to Ebony Lumumba, okay? And she talked about how her parents would drive hours to get Black dolls because they couldn't get any.
That's right.
Where they lived. They would post
That's right.
certain stories from newspapers or other things in the house. They had representations of Black people, Black families in these powerful ways, these positive ways. And so it was she talked about the everyday revolutionary things her parents did to say, you are honorable, you have dignity, we are a great community, we have people don't listen to or don't believe all these other images that are being put in front of you, because you can't, when you're young, you can't necessarily control it. It's kind of like an English class. You can't pick the books.
That's right.
A teacher chooses.
Right.
But if someone's going to give you a book or give you poems that changes the way you feel about yourself and that representation, that's huge.
Right.
Wow. And the line between this photo and those.
But I was just, I'm trying to do the trail of what kind of really made me a poet and how
Yeah.
Jonathan Green and Lucille Clifton by far are the two that stand here. And in the Dave the Potter book, I read an essay about the two of them and this connection and how it made me who I am. So being true to that is really how I got to where I am. And the fact that Jonathan Green painted those Dave the Potter paintings. And now I'm writing to Jonathan Green.
Oh my gosh.
He's the one who helped me with my voice, strengthen my voice. And then here, 30 years later, 25 years later, I'm writing to his work, and we're in the book together.
I love how you have made connections with so many of these people. Like it's really special.
It wasn't like intentional. Like it wasn't, it was just like, I just want you, in some ways, it's an informal mentoring. Like, I want you to mentor me more. Tell me what you know. And I tried not to belabor him. I would just like read whatever I needed to read, get what I never. And then this many years later that he had already done the Dave paintings. Of course, you've already done Dave before we were thinking about Dave in the 90s. Of course, we have gotten here. So,
yes. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing those.
Oh, yeah. So, the other book that is another integral for me, and it is a very popular book, but there's no way I could get around it. And it's my most favorite book by this author, and it's Zora Neale Hurston, Their Eyes Are Watching God. Again, it's another woman who's standing outside of the confines. Her relationship with her professor from Barnard, anthropologist, traveling in times when it was segregated, was illegal for a black woman and a white man to be in a car together. And they're traveling to Florida for her to, capture what she was doing. I'm like, who is this woman? Again, she's defined all of the categories. She's in college, but she's lied about her age. We don't know how old Zora Neale. And it's neither here nor there. All we know is she's brilliant. All we know is that she's turned back to her, not just her past, but folk. She loves the folk, and she wants to record the folk, and she gets a lot of flack for recording the folk and speaking in vernacular English. I love it. I find her work like Shakespeare. I don't even need to compare it to Shakespeare. It's just so lyrical and so poetic that it's a book that I have to continue to read over and over again, and I don't understand how she wrote it in 8 weeks in Haiti.
Yeah, that's pretty wild when you think about it. I mean, that's astounding. Yeah, but she was making her own way.
She was making her own way, and she was doing it and going to voodoo ceremonies. She went deep. She went deeper than I have gone deep. I mean, she was doing. Listen, these two women have a lot in common. I guess, I'm drawn to people, like spirits are drawn to like spirits. Like, I just think that there is a cosmology above us that's not something that's been forced upon us that I can't adhere. I'm attracted to those women, like the witch, like the cat lady, because they're saying, you won't define me. I will be defined by a force greater than you. And that force may be outside of me, but it also may be what's within me. And I will move to that.
Yeah. I will not adhere.
I will not adhere
to this arbitrary, whatever you want to call it. These rules, whatever boundaries you are placing. And I think part of the reason that I was so excited to come see you is because even though the models I have might be different people, it's the same thing.
Right.
They didn't allow a degree, some sort of title to say, you get to decide how I live my life, what's good, what's not good. My favorite rapper, like what's coming up in my mind with you meeting all of these people is I've always been, like, not everybody says yes to these interviews. Even writers I really admire. I think I write them great notes. But I get connected with people that I have a shared spirit with. I really do believe that. But there was a rapper back in the day in Seattle. He grew up in rural Kentucky. And people probably are like, oh my God, he brings this up all the time. He changed my life, man. Like, I don't know if I would have ever healed from depression. I don't know if I ever would have lived a life that was true without him. But his name's Ross Ion. He is from a duo called Common Market in Seattle. But he grew up in rural Kentucky. Went to film school, or theater school, dropped out, got a woman pregnant, married her, went with her and their child to Zambia, Greece, ended up in Seattle. This guy was a maintenance manager at a condo building, okay? And he has some of the most legendary hip-hop albums in Seattle history. Signed Macklemore when Macklemore was nobody.
What?
Okay? And so the reason I'm upset with Macklemore's status as like representing Seattle hip-hop is not because he's a bad guy or that he doesn't deserve it. It's you need to put on for the people that this is who you... similar to what you're doing.
Bring along the people. Yeah.
But Ra didn't have... He had Crohn's disease. And he had to have a full-time job because he also had a child. He needed health care. So he couldn't just tour around the country like
can't.
Some of the other peers. But no matter what, he just kept making music. And I so admired this. And he wrote things that were outside of the typical hip-hop paradigm.
Right.
Because also he couldn't try to pretend like he was from a place he wasn't.
Right.
So he wasn't writing things like he was from the city. He wrote an album called Tobacco Road that I was listening to on the way here.
Oh, wow.
18 tracks that are an ode to his childhood in rural Kentucky.
That's beautiful.
Oldham County.
But that's what it's about.
And I went there.
Did you go there? Of course you went there.
And I went to Oldham County, but I kid you not, later that next year, for my birthday, my ex-girlfriend Molly wrote Ra to send me, a package for my birthday with CDs, signed stuff, just a gift package. I got a job offer for an internship in grad school in Spokane, Washington. I did not give a shit about that job.
You just went.
I knew that if I told him I was 3 hours away, that he was going to say yes to hanging out. So I got to go over to Seattle and hang out with one of my heroes.
That's amazing.
And even if I never see him again, to make that connection, it was like I needed that because it really did. It was a delay where I kind of found myself and really started living true. But like it's that type of stuff where you're meant to meet some of these people. Right. It is by accident, but it's because when you really connect with something, sometimes the world just
you're falling for it. Yeah,
and then you're like, if they can do it, if they can live outside those confines, if they can make their own way, so can I.
Exactly.
And we all need those people.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah, I had to throw that in there.
No, thank you for telling me. And I love the tobacco. I mean, of course you would have gone there, but I'd love when people, especially hip hop or any genre, where people are like, well, you're not legit if you're not East Coast, West Coast, New York or California, LA or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you're legitimate based on wherever you came from. That's what you need to be doing, and not this fake stuff of trying to be something that you're not.
And people can criticize, his albums are better than a lot of people from Brooklyn because they're on some bullshit. They're not rapping about what's real. He's rapping about his father's suicide.
That's right. That's what I'm saying.
And farmers that get into a cycle of abuse with their families because their crop won't yield.
See, all that's the stuff. That's the stuff.
Who's rapping about that? Nobody.
But that's storytelling. Like that to me, all of this is storytelling. Mm-hmm. And the more you are. I don't know when you can hear when it's authentic. You know that this is telling me something that I need to know, and it's not that I want to go deep in people's hardship. It's just like, I really want to know how you got, and you're still here. Like your father committed suicide, you're, whatever you can, and you're still here and you have found the act of creation. That is a superhero status to me. Like that's just how you
There were
become.
all these things.
All the things
that felt
that
like
could have kept you from wherever you should have been going.
Yeah. And he looked back to create the best thing he ever made, in my opinion. He went back to Oldham County, Kentucky in his mind and his heart. He didn't look forward. He wasn't in Seattle, and that's the other thing I relate to. I belong nowhere, technically. This project doesn't belong anywhere. It's already over 10 states.
Wow.
The fact that he got to Seattle and people didn't see him as a real Seattle hip-hop, right? Just like that whole, like...
But see, I have a hard time with the turfs, the turf wars,
annoying.
And being an Air Force brat. See, I don't...
Yeah.
It's so interesting because people are like, well, and I got like, when I was in the poetry slam world for 5 years, which you never get out of, if you ever get in there. That was the 90s.
Yeah.
But people would say, New York looked at, oh, you're from the South. How do you live there? Like, what's coming? It was just all these very shallow insults. And it was like, well, have you ever been? Like, so you're out there saying that your street cred is because you're on the street and you're dodging bullets. But I'll match my resilience with your resilience any day. And the fact what I'm navigating, you know,
And shouldn't all of that be celebrated? Shouldn't
it's
all of
all,
that be?
yeah,
It's all part
it's
of the
not
human
tit for tat.
experience. No.
But that's what it was. It was a put down. It was like, oh, you're from the South, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And that's why I never, you know, but then I'm here and the people hear me talk and they're like, but you're not from here. And I'm like, but I am, you know, so it's that I have that everywhere but nowhere kind of,
Oh, man,
native
yeah.
of nowhere, I guess I could
Yeah,
say.
and I relate to those people that make their own place too, because and maybe even use to their advantage. That I have a hard time relating to someone who's been in the same place for all 40 years of their life or whatever. Not because it's bad,
Yeah.
but because no matter what they try to do, they're missing something. Because you just didn't get that broad experience. Like my dad was in the Air Force. Even when he got out, we were following all these jobs for my mom. Ended up in rural Nebraska, outside of Lincoln. You were just there.
Yeah, I was just there.
Yeah, we were like 40 minutes west of that in some town of like 5,000 called Seward.
Yeah.
And then we ended up back in Ohio, but we lived in Kettering and Vandalia, and then they moved to Columbus and Pittsburgh and Toledo. Now they're in. So even after I left home, then my life was so peripatetic, and I used to see it as like a problem.
Right.
But to me, I was just gathering, like, where am I trying to be?
I saw mine as problematic for a while until I realized it was part of my the fringe element kind of thing played to my strength until I started getting older. Then I really realized, okay, I do have a certain aloofness about me because it's that protection of like, well, I'm going to leave here in 3-4 years. Like, I'm going to get to know you, but you're only going to get in so far because I got to go to the next place. And so if there's that element that's, I think, still in me a lot. But then coming back here the second time as an adult, South Carolina just started to embrace me in ways that I wasn't ready for, but I was prepared to be embraced. You know what I mean? Because I was like, I'm ready to tell these stories. I'm ready to dig in and tell these stories. But had I not been that person who was out there, because I don't really care what I shouldn't say I don't care what people think of me. That's not true. That is not a true statement. I don't let it define me.
Right. Yeah.
Because I'm not I don't go to a traditional church. I'd say I'm Black Baptist culturally.
Well, and there, man, part of me was, I want to do a study. What are the counties that have the most Baptist churches per capita in the South? I was rolling around and I was like, how many can you have?
Well, I don't know if it's which book it's in. I don't know if it's in What My Hands Say, but I have a book called a poem called Benediction, and it's my brother and I, we break down. I'm 15, he's 19. We break down on this quarter stretch of a mile road, and there's 7 churches on this road. But we break down, and this is in the 70s or whatever. We go to the first door that the house looks safe enough.
Yeah.
It's a little older white woman who says, I'll let you use my phone, but y'all are not safe around here. And that's, then I wrote, and then the poem is just me reciting the names of the churches. And I'm just like, how in the heck?
That's a common experience.
And it's not, it's not that far from here. It's in Conisty.
Wow.
But it just, that kind of blew my mind as a kid that we were not safe, and then, in the military, you do have racism, but you don't have it to we weren't having it to the extent of that. But to follow up with Their Eyes Were Watching God, the book that, I won't talk much about it, but I'll just say that it, to me, is kind of like the book it's Valerie Boyd's biography of Zora Hurston, Wrapped in Rainbows.
I haven't read that.
It's a beautiful book, and if I'm not mistaken, Valerie Boyd, I think she left us, didn't she? Did she die?
I don't know. So it's her biography.
It's a biography of Zora Neale.
I love these. You have a couple books by Lucille.
And then, yes.
And then a couple by relating to Zora. That's great. And is that the last one? Or did you have...
No, I have a couple more.
Do you want to say more about the biography, though, just to tell people, like, why?
Well, I love it because it doesn't even read like a biography for me. I think that Zora Neale Hurston is such a mystical creature. Like, and I haven't read all of Zora's books. The book, though, that does it for Their Eyes Were Watching, I don't know why. It just feels like one long poem to me.
Yeah, okay.
The language is so rich and so beautiful. And Wrapped in Rainbows serves as almost like a text to Zora's life. I mean, and that's what a biography does, but I think it's done so well in ways of kind of, in a way, demystifying Zora, which I don't know if we really necessarily need to do all the way, but it's just quite.
I'm going to read it. Yeah, Valerie did die in 2022.
Yeah.
Fairly young.
Yeah, it devastated. I don't know why all these authors I'm bringing up to are gone and they died with the, like Benjamin. Like I still haven't. I'm still trying to deal with my grief around that. I'm compartmentalizing that. I have not grieved these people. I'm not grieving these people. But I will jump back and go back a little bit when we're talking about Lucille Clifton. It's an anthology. It's an anthology also, a book that is really powerful to me and to understand me as a writer and coming into my own is a book. E. Ethelbert Miller is the editor. In Search of Color Everywhere.
Wow. Ramika and I just talked about him a lot.
Really?
Because they're tight. He was the one that helped her with Soul Culture. Yeah.
That anthology came to, I don't know how, I really want to know how I got that book. It was in the 90s. I wasn't used to paying that kind of money for an anthology or a book, period.
Yeah.
And I got it and I read it and that's probably my first collection of African American poets that I felt like I was sitting in a circle with. I'm living in Simpsonville, South Carolina. Lucille Clifton was the first person I saw like as a poet. I mean, there's that. And then, okay, so I'm getting my marching orders. Well, I got to find my tribe. I got to find my people in that anthology. And Reuben Jackson, I can't remember all the poems in there, but I do remember certain poems that just would pop out. And Reuben, do you know Reuben Jackson? He's a DC poet. He passed last year.
Oh my gosh.
But he wrote this poem in there, and I'm going to ad-lib it. I don't know it by heart, but and it was that the white woman turned to me and asked me, "Where do your people summer?" He replied, "On the front porch."
Wow.
And it's just like, I loved it. It's just, it's almost like a Lucille Clifton movie. It's so compressed little poem, but in it is everything.
Yeah, I also love that. Where it's almost like impossible that they did that, but it's all right there.
It's all right there.
It's so simple, but it's also not, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one thing. I didn't read a lot of poetry until after college. Mm-hmm. It was sort of a slow build up to. I always found poetry to be for a certain type of reader that I wasn't. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's because I read poetry that I didn't connect with, but I think you talking about poetry being accessible. I just felt in high school it was just there was no soul around the conversation.
Oh gosh, no.
And so
no high school, no.
It just took me a long time to appreciate it.
Even in college, I didn't, and we're different generations. But even in college, the poetry that I was being served in literature classes was not. I had to search and search to find. Maybe the romantics spoke to me because they had a little something going on there. But it wasn't until I, graduated that I started that journey on books of poetry that I did not put Maya Angelou on my list. I struggled. I struggled.
I was wondering if that was going to be on there.
I didn't put her on there, but I do think I know why the Caged Bird Sing really did orient me as a 15-year-old.
Mm-hmm. It's a really hard exercise. Like
which is why I struggle.
Which is why I said just roll with it.
That's why I wrote.
All of them will be good.
Yes.
And you're gonna leave something out.
Yeah, and then there's a lot that I left out, but I do have. So this one is. I realized that I was not putting novels or on there. I mean, I don't know. I was putting more like June Jordan, but it's not our books or poetry. I put on Poetry for the People. Do you know this book?
No.
It's like an instruction manual. It's like how to be a literary citizen.
Oh man.
And I didn't know that. I didn't know I needed that. Like, it's like what you were talking. So I would equally put The Artist's Way and Poetry for the People are both two books that informed who I am and wrote. And June Jordan, the reason June Jordan was so important to me, I'm living in Asheville. I've got all of this poetry inside of me, and I need to figure out how to give it away. And June Jordan is over there in California, and she's constructed this. It's not a manual. It really isn't a manual, but she just tells her story of what she did as the word teaching artist she doesn't use, but that's what I see it as. I'm a teaching artist.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I'm gravitating to these books that are external on how to extend literature. And what she did, she started this program at the university level, but the way it worked is if you were how did it work? If you're a college student, you could be in the group, but you had to teach the method to someone in high school. If you're high school, you had to teach it to someone in middle school, and middle school had to teach it to elementary students.
I love that.
And she was a very academic poet, but she was also a very activist poet as well.
And also, I want to say, you can be both.
You can.
Like, this is what I
Right.
struggle with the academy is
Right.
you have to be detached from the people. No, it's quite the opposite.
But to me, the academicians that really, I love it when they got both of those things lit. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like, it's so amazing to see.
It's a feat.
It is a feat to keep it alive, right?
Yeah, because that's what we need for students. We need poets of the people. That's why I didn't care for poetry or just didn't know that I cared for it yet. Because no one made that citizen connection. This is why I've always loved the idea of like a citizen scholar.
Yeah.
I don't know that many people do it well.
Yeah.
But even with science, like Christine Connellia, who's a neurologist at the University of Minnesota, is trying to make Tourette research and all this stuff in the brain that's really confusing more palatable for the public. Anytime you can do that, I think is a huge win for everybody. But the idea that you can spread it,
Yes.
and
yes.
you too can teach.
Yes, you can. It's not one either or. I don't know where the dichotomy comes, because I don't think, even as people, we're not split like that. Like, I realize I'm very much a cerebral person.
Yeah.
And that world, I do struggle with going back to get my PhD in African American lit. But then I go, how much time do you have left on the planet? And do you want to spend it in a PhD program, or do you want to spend it writing books?
I hear you. Yeah.
So
You just got to make the call.
My daughters are like, Mom, you have a terminal cancer. Yeah. What does your heart say? And I said, write the books.
Yeah. I mean, it's as simple as that. That's good. It's a good way to think about it.
I mean, most of my stuff is self-taught. Like, who I read is, who I read and who I've read. Yeah, but anyway.
And I love that none of, and so this project, the whole Story Made project was inspired by an English class I took, Literature and Social Change. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that what difference can a story make, I think I realized underlying all of this is I got the syllabus full of authors I'd never read. It was really challenging and really exciting, and opened up all of these doors for reading for me. What I really see these as is like everybody's sharing their own syllabus, and I don't want to make it. I'm not talking about like it's not academic, but that's what it is.
No, but when I put this together and I was looking at it, and I struggled with it for a couple weeks. I said, "This is a class,
right?
I can teach this class. These books this is a class, and it would be a very."
That's what I was thinking this whole time, and the reason I love these lists is because they're not made for a class, though.
No,
and none of you came to these books through a class.
No. All
of your life, these lists have been being made.
They're being made.
And so it's cool to see that you just made your own.
Yes. And last book is Kindred by Octavia Butler. And I'll tell you why. My brother and I have 3 brothers. And one is, growing up, we both loved comic books. Like, we were both, he loved superheroes and I loved all the girly comics. But then he branched off. He turned into a very sci-fi, Trekkie, Star Trek, Star Wars, all of that. And I'm like, bruh, I can't follow you with the sci-fi. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Until one day I called him and I said, I had read Kindred, and I said, oh, sci-fi is a commentary on present day using the future. And when it was done with another Black woman gaze, I got it. I mean, literally, it was as if she was speaking my life. Because the main character, Dana, who gets the whatever and thrown back to slavery, I was having, married to a white man, I was having similar things happen to me I wasn't really writing then, but I was having moments where I would feel like I was being snatched.
Wow.
To the 1800s. Like I would have dreams, I would have, this is going to make, I don't know if I really want to out myself this much, but it doesn't matter. I would have almost seizure-like things that would happen to me. And there would be moments where I would know things about the past that I shouldn't have known.
Wow.
So when I read this, I was like, oh, is this sci-fi or is this a little bit my life? Because I do stay stuck in the 1800s, and my family were like, why are you always writing about that? Why are you always writing about slavery? Why are you writing about the 1800s? But when I read Octavia Butler, I was like, oh my God. And if it's not a real thing that's happening, it is a psychic thing that's happening. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not, it was really throwing me back to my ancestors. It was like, pay attention. So...
Man, it's weird how this conversation's coming full circle because we just started about the history in South Carolina.
That's right.
All the way back to the Rosemont,
That's right. I'm just saying. And so when I read Octavia Butler, I was like, she gets it. She understands. She knows exactly what I'm seeing. Like I see the past. My research is not just in the library, my research is on the ground. And when I'm in a certain place, Charleston mostly, Port City, where most of my ancestors came through.
Yeah.
I am visibly and psychically altered. And that book gave me permission just to say, you are an odd individual. You are a mystical individual. Yeah. You are writing about something that is writing you and is undeniable. And how powerful that she did that in the way, in the fashion that she did it. I mean, it completely woke me up to where, like, this is not a joke. Because I was just like, you're just a odd person. You're just so weird. But then when I got it, when I read Octavia, when I read Kindred, I said, oh my God. And I felt like, because I always felt like a loner. I always felt like an outsider. And that book really did some serious mending. And I don't understand how she did it. I don't know what she was in touch with when she wrote that. I don't know.
It just never ceases to amaze and be special at how these books can find themselves in people's hands. And it does that. I mean, listening to you talk about it, it's like, and you talk about Charleston, and now the path, the trail from Charleston to Waterloo in Lawrence County,
it's
always there. Haven't you always been in the 1800s? You know what I mean?
I've always been in the 1800s, and I've always had these mystical connections, and I've always been the odd child where my mother would say, "Stop looking at me. You're looking into my soul," and I'm like, "I was just looking at you. I don't know." She's like, "You have a way of going deeper." I'm like, I'm just being me.